Well, yesterday, two former shareholders of two banks, Unibank and Unique Bank, Dr. Kobler Dufour and
UT Bank,
and then Amwabin,
yes,
actually submitted petitions to the Speaker of Parliament, and the petitions apparently were submitted to Honorable Mama Ayariga for Parliament to investigate the Bank of Ghana and the Security and Exchange Commission with regards to their conduct in the liquidation of the two banks and so on. Now, there's some contentions around the issues. The minority leader insisted that because the matter was before court, Parliament was stopped from working on the petitions and so on. The Speaker got very worked up, to the extent that the Speaker had to remind the minority leader that he was just a minority leader. Majority leader, and that he was Speaker and was clothed with sufficient powers to do what he was doing and so on. When do I have a problem? You understand? And I have a problem because in this country we are guided by the principle of separation of powers. The judiciary, the executive, and Parliament. I am not so sure that when a matter is pending before the courts, Parliament was discussing that matter and coming up with a verdict which may run contrary to the verdict of the court. And if that should happen, how are we likely to manage this situation? Based on the information I have, based on all the analysis that I've done, have come to the conclusion that some of these banks were treated unfairly by the Bank of Ghana and by the Security and Exchange Commission. I've come to that personal conclusion. But I'm worried that we are running into a situation where there may be conflict between decisions of the Parliament and decisions of the court in this matter. And I don't know how these matters may be resolved eventually. So to some extent, I would think that the minority leader was right. The majority leader was right in raising some of the red flags. The Speaker also argued very strongly that Parliament is a house of the people, and Parliament ought to be seen to be doing, to be meeting the expectation of the people, and that if people have grievances and they bring petitions and so on, there is no law which insists that they should reject those petitions. He may have a point there, but bottom line is what would happen in real practical terms if the courts take a certain decision which runs counter to what Parliament may decide. What would happen? There will be a crisis. And how we resolve that crisis, I don't know.
So, I mean, it's actually straddles a lot of aspects of our governance structure. As far as I'm concerned, these are two old friends and, contemporaries who are basically having a banter on the score of that. So I won't really comment on that. But the issue to do with the separation of powers is also key, is important, especially when the issue is being dealt with in the courts. I'm not too sure of the standing orders in terms of if, in this particular instance, Parliament is clothed with the powers to be able to do something concurrently as the issue is being dealt with in court. And so really the matter of if they have the jurisdiction or not, I think that it has to be interrogated a bit further. Because Parliament is meant to be the representative of the people, I think that in terms of the issues that they are supposed to be able to delve into and interrogate, would cut across various sectors. But I'm not too sure on this particular one, especially when it's already been activated through court processes. And so if it's been admitted by the Speaker, and it's actually been referred to a committee, I think, then we probably would have to wait to see how that process will pan out, and even it has any bearing on the substantive case that is in court. And so I think that when it comes to this, the other asides, really, I think that is, very enlightened gentlemen of our time, having a little bit of banter. And it also adds up to the thing. I mean, sometimes I think that our politics can be a bit too adversarial, if you ask me. And every now and then you need a bit of this thing to just let everybody out there understand and appreciate that in as much as we might be on different wavelengths when it comes to politics and even divergent views and opinions, in the final analysis, we can be friends, and we can also have the same, if you like, projection, the national interest at heart. So really, maybe it should be a testament to everybody out there trying to kill themselves by virtue of this.
All right, so there's an issue that has come up. People have spoken about it, and it's about Achimota School and a kid who has dreadlocks.
Yes.
And I have, in the last 3 days, been trying to look at the bigger picture. So what I've sought to do is to look at the antecedents of schools that today we call public schools. Not all of them were set up by the government, in trying to look at those schools. So you find out that some were set for different reasons. There were some that were set up by faith-based organizations. There's some that were set up by private individuals. You can also even look at the Ghana National College, what led to its formation and all that. Along the line, the state has made all these institutions public institutions. In making them public institutions, you also realize that the state, and I use state because government can be misinterpreted. You know, the state is taking over control and to an extent management and then supervision. But most of these schools have been left to continue with their values, cultures, and traditions. What makes them peculiar, you know? And so, at what stage do these values, traditions, and cultures breach or conform with what the GES or the Ministry of Education or the country's laws itself have put out there?